All right, so today we're going to talk about the rise of totalitarianism. In the last episode, I talked to you guys, or the last edition, I talked to you guys about totalitarianism, and I talked to you guys about the idea that dictators came up because of the Great Depression, and that was one of the effects. Okay, but today we're going to talk specifically about what happened in Europe, in the different countries, in several countries in between the two world wars. So let's talk first of all about Italy. Before the dictators in Italy, the dictator that was allowed to rise in Italy is a guy named Benito Mussolini. Before the dictators in Italy, they suffered from parliamentary paralysis. And what this essentially means is that their parliament or their lawmaking body was not responsive to the needs of the people. They suffered a lot from World War I. They were really disgruntled. The people were disgruntled because they thought they were going to be promised all this land in all the secret treaties from joining the Allies, but that didn't play out, and the economy suffered in Italy, and the government didn't accomplish anything, and they felt that they wanted a strong government so that they could take back and return to power like they had before. Okay, in the Soviet Union, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, like I said, became the initial dictator before Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin is the dictator that we're going to talk most of the time about over the next couple of days. But Vladimir Lenin was the one that kicked off totalitarianism and communism in Soviet Union. Well, during the Russian Civil War, the Soviet Civil War, they practiced what's called war communism. War communism is basically the idea that the government takes over all the resources, all industry, steel production, automobile production, whatever industry they need, and turn that production toward benefiting the war, toward helping the communists win the war. And so once the communists, the Bolsheviks, defeated the Red Army, defeated the White Army, the war was over. And so what they noticed was that their economy was lagging. It was pretty bad. Okay, and so what Lenin instituted was something called a new economic plan, or the NEP. And the new economic plan is different from war communism. Under war communism, the government controlled all the means of production. The government dictated everything. Under the new economic plan, a limited amount of free market capitalism was allowed for small-time business owners. Okay, it was very small, but it did allow farmers, small cabinet makers, or small artisans to sell stuff on their own and to do things under their own power and to make money on their own. In Japan, they had it just a little bit differently. They had a different take on totalitarianism, and here's why. Japan, if you'll remember, was practicing and learning from the West and was practicing imperialism. Japan began growing under a guy named Hideki Tojo. Hideki Tojo was a general, and Hideki Tojo convinced the Emperor Hirohito that the best way to regain strength and power for the Japanese was to expand their empire. And prior to the true rise of totalitarianism, they were expanding and they were becoming much more militaristic than they had in previous years. And they began taking over Manchuria and they expanded into Japan. Remember, as we talked about with the Meiji Restoration, they also greatly westernized. They had a democratic government, but that democracy was not quite what we think about it. And I'll talk more about that in a second. In Germany, the weak government of the Weimar really hurt Germany, and they were not happy. And the dictator that was allowed to rise in Germany was Adolf Hitler. And Germans were not pleased with the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was the government that took place, that governed Germany in between the wars for the most part. And again, just like the Italian government, they were weak. They were facing financial troubles. They were not able to pay their debts because of the giant wartime reparation payments. People didn't have jobs. They were unhappy. They were treated poorly by the French. The French even went on and invaded their country to take out coal and to exact or pull out the reparation payments, and that did not make them happy. Okay, and so what happened was they had rampant inflation and they were terribly unhappy. So what did all these countries have in common? What did all four of these have in common? Well, what they had in common was that they were all economically poor off. Japan was okay economically, but Italy, the Soviet Union, and Germany in particular were very poor economically. And so their economies were struggling because that's where most of the fighting took place in World War I. Well, they were not happy with their leaders after World War I. What they had seen, with the exception of Japan, what they had seen was that other countries were getting things, other countries were being successful, at least in their eyes, and they did not feel like their countries got the proper deal that they were expecting. Okay, and so they looked to dictators to solve their problems. They looked to someone to fix the economy, to put food on their table, and these dictators all promised a better life. So what are the characteristics of what we'll call a totalitarian regime? Okay, totalitarianism, first of all, means total control and unlimited power by the government. Okay, that's essentially where we get the word totalitarianism, is they control all parts of society. They control the economy, they control social life, and they have unlimited power. They have faced no rule of law. Government makes up its own laws, and government essentially does what they want. They're also marked by a single party, single political party, and one single leader is the head of that political party. Now, that's important to note because all of these came to power relatively democratically. Okay, Japan, again, is the one exception, and the Soviet Union is a little bit different, but they all theoretically were democracies. And in all of these countries, totalitarianism came to power through democratic means. Okay, after they took power, after the single party outlawed the other powers or other parties, and one single leader took charge, they also began denying rights of individuals. So, free speech is a right that was denied because if you spoke out against the government, that was bad. Certain groups of people, depending on where you were denied rights. Germany and Japan created this theory of ethnic superiority to everyone. And they took that idea and denied certain groups rights. They granted groups rights over others and controlled the movement, controlled where people live, how they interacted greatly. And last but not least, last characteristic is that all totalitarian regimes promise a return to the good old days. So anytime that they wanted to strike fear or kind of inspire the people, they would basically say, we were great once, but these people, quote unquote, have led to our demise, and we're going to return and make our country great again. In the words of Donald Trump, we're going to make America great again. That's his political slogan, and it's kind of an idea. I'm not saying that he's a totalitarianist by any stretch of the imagination, but totalitarian regimes all say that we were once great historically, and we are going to return to greatness again. Hitler said, we're going to return to the greatness of the Holy Roman Empire. Mussolini said that we're going to return to greatness of the Roman Empire. Japan said, we're going to return to greatness. The one exception to this is kind of the Soviet Union. They took a little bit different take on it. And they said, we're going to make things great by creating a new world. And so that was a difference with them. But Italy, Japan, and Germany all said, we're going to return to the good old days when we were strong like we should be. We'll spend more time on this over the next couple of days and look at specific countries and their leaders. But that's a general sense and idea of what totalitarianism is. Bye.